Hello and welcome to hopefully my final PoE video for pre-league, which is just going to be going over the SSF friendly Reave, Trickster, or Reave Slayer. I do have a Slayer POB here, just because everybody and their mother is talking Slayer, and yes, Slayer is a bit more damage. It's relatively the same thickness or less thickness depending on which ascendancy nodes you want to take. If you want to take Overkill Leech, you can take Overkill Leech, but I've simulated it enough where it's barely more damage. Obviously, you have access to a much better Leaguestart, and if you fuck it up, you can reroll to a different build if you really want to. It's up to you. However, for me, I will be trying to play either the Dagger variant. Ooh, or the, sorry, I hit the scroll wheel when I shouldn't have, or the Claw variant, depending on whatever potential uniques or anything like that that I get. One thing to note, the biggest difference between Dagger and Claws is a substantial crit rate difference. So if I go to the Claw POB here, it's at 80% without the Cluster Jewel, and the Cluster Jewel will lower your crit chance, probably, depending on whatever passives you take. And then if I go to the Dagger one, it is almost crit capped. So there's about a 15-ish% crit chance. It all depends on your item rolls. And I've included like a relatively obtainable weapon as well as information on how to craft the relatively obtainable weapon outside of like borderline mirror tier. Like the borderline mirror tier almost doubles the damage. But something like this should be accessible. Obviously the crit chance goes down a lot, but the crit chance for a base Dagger goes down even more. So we went to 62% with the base Dagger. So you are going to need to resolve the crit. Obviously taking these nodes here is a little bit of crit, but you're most likely going to need to run a Tincture with crit chance if you're going Claws, depending on what claw you get. Obviously something like this is pretty weak because it only has a 7% base crit, but you can get like Touch of Anguish here, for example, is more DPS. So we can add that into the POB here, and you can see you get more DPS. The damage split is fine for the sake of Trinity here, but it is not ideal. However, it is good enough for an SSF. So like 3 million Shaper DPS, almost 4 million for SSF with no Cluster Jewel. So if this is what I end up getting, this is what I end up getting. And this is without the better aura setup. This is with the no enlighten aura setup. So just that's the Dagger versus Claw comparison. For the rest of this video, I'm just going to be strictly talking Dagger POB. So there's a lot of changes between this and the last two videos, and I want to say that I've, one, decreased the points for the quote-unquote endgame to 95. Additionally, I would like to add that these points here are optional. It completely depends on your spread for Trinity. So in the final endgame setup, this is including a physical convert glove and phys convert to lightning on the tree, so we don't need to run a Fizz to Lightning. If we had to run Fizz to Lightning instead of Pulverize, our cold damage would barely be competing, and we would have to balance Trinity around getting more fire into the build. But this is with a pure physical dagger weapon. This is not with a physical hybrid weapon. The physical hybrid weapon is still relatively fine for the sake of Trinity. Obviously, you're going to have some hits get blocked by the inverted here. So some hits, they're going to be lower, some hits, they're going to be higher. So you can get and maintain a spike through that, as well as your fire is higher than your base cold. So if your base cold hits, and then a mid fire hits, and then any lightning hits, pretty much, you're going to be fine. So it kind of depends on what you need out of the build. If you are running the other auras as well, this all changes. Like if you have an Enlighten, where you have enough accuracy to drop precision entirely. Like if you're a dagger, that is an option to just drop precision entirely. And then now if you look at our conversion ratios, we have 27k min cold, 28k min fire, 57k top end fire, 76k top end cold, and 62 to 170 on the lightning. The 170 min is lower than the cold top by a good margin, so that's fine. And then the min cold is miraculously lower than the min fire. Now, there is one thing that I would like to note for your calculations here. Herald of Ash currently in POB is only calculating 15% of your physical as extra fire. So in the calc section, if this gets changed, just remember to remove this, else you will fuck up your conversion ratios. So I hope I've explained conversion well enough. Of course, if you want to use the base aura setup, this is the base aura setup. You do not run the Herald of Purity with the Guardian Blessing Hatred tech. And honestly, this is a little too try-hard, even for my own taste. But for the sake of the video, I just wanted to demonstrate the differences and how you can still maintain a balance. So like, yeah. And additionally, you can play around with your gloves. You can get 25% fizz converted to lightning and 25% fizz converted to cold. So you can bump that cold damage up a little bit to be higher than your lightning, even on a setup where you do not have the Herald of Purity Guardian Hatred. So this is just base Hatred. Another thing that you can do, at least for the early game, is instead of running a Dawnbreaker or a Mist Wall or anything else, you can run the Colton Halt. The Colton Halt gives you an additional 13% fizz as extra cold. This is a worthwhile unique, in my opinion. It also gives you a boatload of base cold res, so it's fine as like a day 1, day 2 until you like figure out your conversion ratios. But as you can tell now, with a reasonably crafted dagger, and I can explain later, much later in the video, on how you can obtain something like this, you can tell that we have decent Trinity, and we can then switch to the pulverized setup, and as you can tell, our Trinity is like spot on. The min fire is a little bit higher than the cold, and the top end cold is not competing with the min lighting whatsoever. So this is like perfect ratios right here. But if I unequip the Colton Halt and go back to the other Shield of Dawnbreaker, you can tell that we're still fine. Yeah, our fire and cold are close, but it's fine. You really just care about your cold top end being higher than your lightning. If your cold top end is not higher than your min lightning, that's when you really need to worry about getting your fire damage up. So that is why I'm using a fire damage dagger, because I don't want to give the base lightning too much lightning damage. So that's the explanation on why the ideal, like, this is what I would consider a mid-tier weapon. This is a step upgrade over like something like a Touch of Anguish. Obviously we're on the Dagger POB, so it's not the best comparison. So I guess for the sake of the video, we will do, I believe it's called Goblin Edge. Yeah, this is kind of like a base weapon that you can get. So Goblin Edge is only, it's 30% less damage, so it's substantial, but it's not like going to be the difference of ruining your league start. So we can then look at the conversion ratios here. With the gloves on and pulverize, we are fine. This doesn't really change the glove conversion at all. And with the, and we're still on the base auras, and with the without the Cult in the Halt, with base auras, not using an Enlighten, we're still fine on a Fizz to Lightning style setup. Because our top end fire is above our cold, and our top end lightning is way above, or top end cold is definitely above lightning. However, it is kind of sketchy. So something like Goblin Edge is perfectly fine for this build with this conversion setup, regardless if you are running Fizz to Lightning or not in your gearing. So it is fine. Just want to double check. Yep, double lightning, double lightning. So, with that being said, let's remove it, and now let's see where we end up. So, we are on Pulverize. We are fine. Our Trinity is balanced. This is great for Trinity. So, because of that, we can even drop the points down to a level 92 tree. Now, because it's a level 92 tree, you have options. Because we don't really take advantage of reduced mana reservation, you could come out here and grab some of the reduced mana reservation, or you can just pick up more life on the tree. You can pick up just like more QOL stuff. Additionally, you can pick up like this power charge node, or you can like take cold hearted calculation. This will give you a little bit of increased damage, a little bit of crit chance instead of the power charge. So you do have options depending on your gearing. Additionally, the biggest thing, because this is going to be utilizing a tincture, you can use a tincture, and then you could take something like the practicized reapplication. So your tinctures have a little bit increased effect, and then they have a little bit of cooldown recovery. Or you can come over here and do less mana burn rate and then recover mana. But we are a Trickster. We have anywhere from like 10 to 11 notables. It really depends on the POB config that you want to use, going for Polymath. So Polymath is giving us like 10% mana recovery rate on kill. So the mana is fine. Additionally, other things that you can do is like you can reduce your attack mana and then like increase your precision. You can take weapon artistry for a little bit of block chance, which does impact the build if you're using the Dawnbreaker, which is the ideal unique in this build. But mainly it's just for the attack speed, because attack speed is king right now. Like pretty much anytime I POB anything, attack speed is like the best thing since sliced bread. The claw build definitely gets way more attack speed. Like if you look at the base attack speed of an endgame claw versus like an endgame dagger, like it's pretty substantial attack rate difference. However, like if you've got an endgame POB, it's not going to be so noticeable while like moving around. However, in comparison to like the average claw and the average dagger, I think the jump up from the average claw and average dagger in the, like a unique case is going to be quite substantial. And like Touch of Anguish is such a good item for this build, and I would be fine as a league starter having options of multiple different uniques that can literally like take this from like a precise technique build into like a borderline crit capped on like day one gear. So for me personally, this is what makes this build super SSF viable. Additionally, we are not using the refraction Reave. We are just scaling the base Reave through LE conversion. If you want to, you can use an series promise. Like let's say you're doing the Dagger build, you can drop this Diamond Flask and run an series promise. You just gotta get shock immunity somewhere else in the build. Additionally, you can solve your ailment immunity through the like storm gift or whatever it's called jewels. They're so freaking rare that you'll probably not see one, and they'll probably be very expensive at Leaguestart. So there's a lot of things that you can do to make this build truly your own. Additionally, you can play this build with a Soul Drinker or Escape Artist. Me personally, I'm going to be doing one step ahead because this solves your freeze immunity without needing to click the Pantheon Brine King. So if we go over to the config, we would have to have Brine King for the Nassar Lion of the Seas. You'd have to go kill the boss and get the Avoid Frozen. And then instead of that, you can do like Soul of Lunaris, which helps you against shotgunning hits, gives you physical damage reduction in the map, and then reduced elemental damage taken if you've been hit recently, and avoiding all projectiles that have chained, which is nice if you are using the Aura 2 setup with the Herald of Purity tech, because those Herald of Purities will cause you to take chain damage. Additionally, Soul of Solaris is just good if there's one nearby enemy. This is great for bossing. Obviously, the like avoiding ailments, take no extra damage from critical. This is all just general goodness. And then Soul of Arakali, if like degens are super scary for you for whatever reason, this is also super nice to have. So I just like the ability to not rely on Soul of the Brine King at a league starter. So that is why I'm choosing to personally play with the non-hybridized life pool and everything else. However, I have included POBs. This is the endgame hybrid life. So your Fizz max hit is going to completely, entirely depend on your gear. Obviously, I am using an evasion armor piece because I think going evasion armor with the other Trickster build is going to be better for an SSF Leaguestart progression. However, I do think that with this hybrid setup, you can get a much higher max hit, and I think that'll be comfier for a lot of other people in the Trade League. So that's what I would personally suggest in Trade League. Maybe you League start with the hybrid armor and evasion, because I do think that's going to be better for a general mapper. And then respec into the hybrid life and ES if you get the gear for it, because I think it is just going to push the gear requirement through the moon. Now, I do want to talk about the gear choices here. Obviously, in this POB, the only two things that I have crafted like to my own personal perfection is the gloves here. With these are the desired mods that I would have. Anything else is just a luxury after this. Intimidate is more damage. The conversion so that the build functions well, so that you can click Vol Reave and not have to carry about killing yourself to reflect. And then the accuracy. Other than that, these gloves should be an evasion hybrid base. These boots should be an evasion armor hybrid. The rings can be whatever. The helmet, for whatever reason, I forgot to re-equip Blizzard Crown here for whatever silly reason. Oh yeah, to show off the min-cold conversion working. That's the main reason that I took off the Blizzard Crown. I forgot about that. But this should be an armor evasion piece. And with the new increases to the base armor rolls that you can get on items, as well as the base evasion, I expect to be able to hit around like 75% evade, and at least like the 5 to 6k armor. Like I think 5 to 6k armor, especially with like the shield giving you such a big, huge armor roll. I have no idea if this was perfect roll. I think it is actually a perfect roll for the armor percentage. Let me just double check that. No, it is not. It is not. So you can get even more armor. So I do think getting like bare bones minimum, even with some of the worst gear imaginable, I think 5k armor is doable in a build like this. Like the worst gear possible, 5k armor. If you don't want to run the Jade Flask, just run an Armor Flask. It'll mean that you get hit more often, which for the sake of the gain 2 charges when you are hit by an enemy, that's like the best mod for any build that doesn't use Mage Blood or a Headhunter or anything like that. You just want to gain 2 charges, because you get hit enough, it'll keep it up, and spells count as hit, so if you do like a spell boss or whatever, spell focus boss, and they're shotgunning you a lot, it'll work that way. But the Dagger endgame is what I would suggest doing to anybody who is new to Trickster, or and the same thing with the armor evasion stuff applies to Slayer. So your max fizz hit is going to go up with a build like this. It just is. You can tell that, I believe even just changing that little bit of armor, my fizz hit went up like an extra like 500 or something. So that's kind of crazy. Let's just roleplay, make this a min, and see what happens to the fizz hit. It goes down like quite a bit. So you can, your fizz mint is dependent on how you build your character. You don't need a Blizzard Crown. The Blizzard Crown can be replaced by any armor evasion base, and then you can just get a fizz taken as implicit. The cold damage is nice. It is not requirement. Early on, it could feel very, very impactful if you don't have like a good weapon, because like just taking this item off, like that's substantial amount of damage if you don't have a crafted weapon. So this is something that you may or may not want depending on your gearing. I'm still going to chase after a Blizzard Crown just so I can have one crafted that works for my build. Now, how to craft the weapon. Also, I apologize, but this is probably the most amount of text I've ever written for a build. I've tried to do as many, like, multiple different colors. This does have leveling information. However, I'm not going to hold your hand with leveling. I won't tell you what to prioritize. I think to get better at Path of Exile, people need to be decisive, and making a tree is part of that process. I have provided a leveling to Act 5 utilizing the skill Frostblades, and in Act to level 10 utilizing Frostblades as well. And then the mapping with Precise Technique is utilizing Frostblades. This is not ideal, but hopefully by then one of the uniques that I list in the notes as well has dropped for you that is usable. So I do pray that your RNG is as good as maybe mine will be. Disclaimer, I probably should have started this video with this, but this is just how I would approach playing the build. Please feel free to utilize everything to your own interpretation. I am not one of those people that is going to be like, this is my build, you must play my build my way. I am not one of those people. I've played Reave many times over years, and this is just my thoughts going into patch 3.25. Armor and defense scaling is at an all-time low for the right side trees. Utilizing armor and evasion bases is probably ideal for maximizing your random mapping experience. I am uncertain about Ubers. However, in SSF, you level up and then you go do your Ubers, you go do your like Elder spamming, you go do like your 17 fucking Mavens that like I do at one time, all after you level up. Like that's just how you play SSF. Your Fizz max hit can be improved with multiple different items, such as using a different helmet with the Eldritch mod, with a physical damage reduction suffix. Yeah, so there's so many things that you can do. My main goal for this is if that soul gain prevention mod is applied to daggers as an enchant, I want a super fast mapper where I can just frostblink around and click Vol Reave. That is my goal, because even with just this Goblin Edge ambusher and all the gear that I've already talked about, I am at 800-ish K average hit, and this hits 8 times. So it covers your screen in Reaves, and it hits 8 times. So this is just going to be me blinking around the fucking map, obliterating everything in my path. Like, this is going to feel so good for mapping. And this is not even including a tincture, so my damage could go up. And this is 80% crit chance. And just for the sake of consistency, I did this in another video, but because I am a Dagger build in this config, if I set the enemy life to full and Assassin's Mark off, I'm still at 80% crit. So it's still going to feel great mapping. So yeah, I hope I've explained enough of that stuff so we can move on to other things. Even with an Amber Amulet, you will need 65 strength, 65 using a Dawnbreaker, hence this 159 strength requirement. You will need 30 intelligence with this exact passive tree. It's 113 for like 95% of the Dagger weapons, potentially higher if you are using the ES playstyle and playing a hybrid life ES build. That is why the tree utilizes going up here for melding. That is why the tree comes up here for Written in Blood. Written in Blood also gives you an additional 10 strength. The strength requirement would be a lot higher if Master of Blades didn't exist. If I unspec this is literally 17% damage for my build, and that is utilizing a fucking Goblin Edge. So this is a lot of damage for this build. So it's a lot of damage, and it gives you 30 strength. So beef is already allocated. You don't need to allocate beef. Alright? Capiche? We got this? No allocating beef. You cannot allocate it, whether the game would let you or not. Already went over all of this. Already went over all of this. I just rewrote it here because I know there's going to be people that click on the video, they click on the POB, and then they scrutinize the shit out of it, and they never click notes. That's why I'm including all this shit. Spell suppression. This build gets anywhere from 78 to 88% chance, depending on Dagger or Claw setup, if you follow it precisely. So you will need suffixes with spell suppression. You can also use the Lucky Mastery until then, and then switch after. So notice how there's like barely any suffix rolls on a lot of this gear. No suffix rolls, no suffix rolls. This is just a standard Amber Amulet. This is kind of roll stuff that you would want to go for. Obviously, these rings are kind of like ideal, like basically perfect for a build like this. And this belt is definitely 100% replaceable. I just use these crafted accessories to cap the resistances for the sake of the video. That's literally why. You can replace this rustic stash with a leather belt. You can replace these rings with other rings. I do not care what you do. You can use uniques. I do not care. This is SSF friendly build guide. The 6-link setup, drop Pulverize if you have a slow attack speed weapon in favor of physical lightning, especially if you are missing the conversion from gloves to optimize DPS. Real quick, with the Reave, the Pulverize, as you can tell here, ignore the AoE radius of the ball Reave because it's a complete fucking lie. So I am at 6.2 meters. If I uncheck Pulverize, I go down to 5.2. So it just gives you about 1 meter radius. It's really not that big of a deal. If you already have the conversion gloves, you run melee fizz instead of Pulverize. Or another thing that you could do is run volatility if you want to shock a little bit more consistently, or if you are running a high level precision, you run inspiration. So that is some of the other options you can use. Ultra Simplicits, this is just how I would approach it. The only two that are absolute mandatory is this Fortify on hit and the physical conversion. I think those two are mandatory. Everything else is up to your discretion. These are just more damage. You can run the endurance charge instead of the crit multi as a trickster with the swift killer. This prolongs your generation so that every 15 seconds you gain an endurance charge. After 45 seconds, you have permanent endurance charges for the sake of consistency. So you would not need to run Enduring Cry if you really wanted to. So you can drop Enduring Cry for something like a Sigil of Power or anything else like that. Blizzard Crown, not required. Dagger, the perks, more crit, especially on full life while mapping. However, you can make up that difference. If you come down here, you uncheck this, and you check 150% increased critical strike chance against enemies that are on full life. You can click that, and that'll make your claw mapping way smoother. If you only care about having a speedy mapper, it's a literally 25 crit multi against bosses, pretty much. Like, that's it. That's all it's really going to be noticeable on. With the Dagger Mastery, because you can get 10% spell suppression by wielding a dagger, and you will drop this later on if you already have the spell suppress from suffixes, so that can save you a point. The Dagger Mastery makes it so that it is easier to cap your spell suppression. That's why it's 78 to 88%, depending on the Dagger or Claw setup. Potential access to the Soul Gain Lockout enchant on weapon, rumored by Zizarin. That is the big reason why I am pushing daggers so hard, in addition to the crit chance. Claw perks, more attack speed, wicked speed. Life gain on hit is massive comfort. The biggest con is the crit chance. However, at least for a mapping situation, you can make up that crit chance with the crit mastery. Uniques. These can substitute a rare for the purpose of a League starter to switch to crit immediately from the precise technique tree that I already discussed. I think claws have better uniques than daggers for this build. So if you do get a unique claw, you just run the unique claw. Bloodseeker has instant leech. Scourge is super basic, but generally good. Wasp Nest and Touch of Anguish are your two best. I do not know which one is better. I have not POB'd it. Goblin Edge is super safe. Taproot is closest roll to a crafted dagger in terms of attack speed and crit. However, it is just lower on the top end. And Beanos is Giga crit, but it's the slowest weapon out of all of these listed. The Beanos, you would not need to care about a Diamond Flask even with the Beanos. Like, that's just how insane Beanos is. However, it is super slow. So instead of a Diamond Flask, you would need to run, like, just a flask with the suffix that has fucking attack speed on it or some shit. Like, I don't know how you're gonna fix it without getting shocked to hell. But if a Beanos drops in SSF, I'm not gonna be complaining. I'm gonna be using a Beanos. This is how I would go about crafting a serviceable weapon, aka this weapon that gives you 30% more damage than a Goblin Edge. A Goblino Edge. I am not the greatest crafter out there. There's probably a better and a safer way to craft a weapon. Because of this league, they have reintroduced recombinators, and the trailer, it looked like they took a T1 roll item and another T1 rolled item with random junk mods. They smashed them together, resulting in a T21 rolls and other random rolls. Assuming this trailer is accurate, we can proceed with caution. There's a vendor recipe for flat physical and flat elemental damage rolls that you can boost up by 1 tier. You take a weapon with whatever physical or flat elemental damage. So like if you hit a T2, you only need to do this once. If you hit a T3, you need to do this twice for that item. Understand? It is a base magic or rare weapon with that desired flat roll, and then an augment and a flask related to that damage type. Topaz is for fire, Granite is for physical, so keep that in mind. And then you vendor it. Just double check that the recipe still works. There is a recipe, vendor recipe thing on PoE Wiki. If this is confusing for you, you can literally go to the PoE Wiki and you just search physical, and it'll be one of them that pops up, and then right underneath the physical one, you can find the other elemental ones. And then you do this until it is T1. Then there's alternative options. Just use essences and recombinate. If this works, it's a massive time sync saver at the option of just having access to essences. Option 2.2, use alteration spam. I'm in SSF. Alterations are a huge time sink and currency sink, so I will most likely just be settling with like T3 after I alteration spam it, and then upgrading it through getting the flasks. You will have to enable flasks on your filter. I am sorry. You are going to have to enable them and pick them up if you want to try to attempt to craft a weapon like this. And then, additionally, I just need to say that when you smash these weapons, it can brick. So You may even have a 1 in 4 of just fucking like getting the item that you want. However, this is the best way to 3D print an upgrade. So I would recommend smashing these two T1 weapons together, praying for a good result, annul off a bad prefix if you hit one. You can either do this through beast crafting or through just annul clicking. And then you can craft prefix cannot be changed and scour if you have just like 2 suffix modifiers and no additional prefixes, leaving behind the T1 flat physical and the T1 flat elemental, preferably fire for Trinity. Because if you get too much flat lightning, you really need the enlighten to make sure the cold is up there, and you may need passive points on the Atlas, and you may even need a Cult and Halt to ensure that you have enough cold damage. In addition, you may need more cold damage from like your gearing, so your rings may need cold damage. So just get the flat fire, and that removes the option of your cold potentially being way too high in comparison to your lightning, and everything like that. It's just easier. It's easier. Because when you start incorporating Blizzard Crown and everything else, it can get very complicated very quickly. Optional step. Prefix cannot be changed, and Veiled Orb. Veiled Orb. You try to block a mod after you Veil Orb, and then, so I would do, I would block a prefix, I would craft a prefix, and pray that you hit a suffix. If you don't craft a prefix, it'll hit a prefix, and if it's not %fizz, it bricks it, and you need to annul again. So I would personally go about this by crafting a prefix modifier and praying that you hit either like crit multiplier if a nearby enemy is unique or whatever it is, or attack speed with like blood rage on it. That's serviceable, I guess. Or like crit chance hybrid with like stats. Any of those mods are okay. And then you would multi-mod with %physical, attack speed, or crit, depending on the veil roll you end up. Additionally, if you just completely brick the item and it's a terrible suffix, you can just prefix cannot be changed, remove it, and then multi-mod, and then exalt slam. Or you can like maybe do like a Redeemer, Crusader, etc. There might be a potential option for a good suffix there as well. However, at that point, you're just straight up Gambo. So I hope that explains the weapon process. Additionally, you can get fractured items and try to fracture craft a weapon. It may only be like 15 or 20% better than like a Goblin Edge or a Touch of Anguish, because both these items are relatively similar DPS. The Touch of Anguish is a lot better than a Goblin Edge. I think Touch of Anguish is the better weapon out of all of these. I do not know for certain. But this is just like a comparison of those two. So yeah, just POB warrior at your own caution. How about flat elemental damage scaling? You would have to revise the tree, links, gearing. However, I think it's competitive early game, but it will fall off late game, especially when you start doing this aura tech. And if you can resolve through a jewel, getting like all of your ignite, shock, everything like that solved, you can then just not give a shit and be able to just like go hog wild on like Aziri's Promise, Taste of Hate, stuff like that, and just scale this damage even higher. Additionally, this kind of a build works tremendously well with an Aura bot. Tremendously well, because it's a fizz scaling build. The experimental tree. This tree is the experimental endgame setup. This is higher skill points, however, it is potentially higher damage. The Feed the Fury only works if you have Soul Drinker. This is while leeching, so if you are not on full life, you need to be while leeching. Additionally, you can take this node where you count on full life while above maximum life or above, and then you are constantly leeching from Blood Rage. So that will make it so that you get Feed the Fury while mapping as a general use case. So the attack speed for the most part is going to feel fine. What else? You're losing a lot of crit chance by switching to this tree, because you probably will have to drop depth perception. But if you don't need this physical as extra, you can pick up depth perception and the power charge to compensate and get right back to the same amount of investment. Okay, understandable. Secrets of Suffering is an option to resolve crit issues with cluster jewel setup. Like, let's say you're Claw, but you have no crit chance. You just have Giga Fizz, Giga attack speed, everything else. You can run a Claw like this without a crit chance roll and be absolutely happy. You can also run like Secrets of Suffering, potentially with the Skitterbot technology, so that you can still apply a shock and chill and whatnot. So that is an option. However, I have not POB warriored this whatsoever. I have not touched it. I think crit is the highest priority for a Claw build. I think elemental damage is the highest priority for a Dagger build in regards to a Tincture. There is a Rage affix on Tinctures. However, I believe the Anoint is way better. If you use a Tincture, make sure to solve as many ailments as possible. This build does not currently get poison immunity. If you are going into a boss fight that has poison focus mechanics, you need an alternative light flask with poison immunity on it. So, why am I spacing out on his name? But like the bosses for Elder and boss for Cyrus, they both have a poison boss. You would want to accommodate for poison before you go into those fights. It's just a light flask change. If you're an SSF player, you already know this, but if you're a Trade League Andy, you may not. Enemy resistances. This build takes advantage of the chance to invert. It is only getting sources of exposure through the spell suppression mastery. So you would have to be hit by a spell and then suppress it with 100% spell suppress, which this build with a Dagger setup is at 88%. So you would have to cap it through gear in order to run this mod. Else you are stuck running the chance to spell suppress is lucky. You are stuck with that until you get this. So this is a damage increase. It is an average damage increase. It is noteworthy that you literally need to take damage in order to apply this. However, the biggest reason that it is a damage increase is because of polymath. Polymath will make it a more damage multiplier, higher than it already is, because we are an invert build. I hope that explains like the mechanics of this. So this is optional if you cap your spell suppress and you want to pick up like even more jewel sockets or pick up more life or allocate Wind Dancer, because some people, they may like Wind Dancer. If you don't like Wind Dancer, you don't need to take it in a build like this. Or a note, you do not need to run the Herald. Yeah, I've already talked about this. Basically, you need to... It's more socket pressure. Additional gems you can run. If you have a high intelligence, you can use a level 20 Sigil of Power. It has a high mana cost, so you may want to life tap it. However, if you can solve the issue of having a high level Sigil of Power, it does give you an absurd amount of damage increase. This is like almost 10%. And this is just for a level 20 without taking into consideration the mana stage gain. So if we go into your config, and well, first I guess we need to enable this. We go into the config, we only have one stage. When you place the Sigil of Power, it automatically counts as having one stage. If we change this to 2 stages, we skyrocket in DPS. So that is something to consider for the budget variant. However, for the sake of consistency, I'm going to simulate a level 5, which is more realistic. Actually, I think level 5, just because at this point, with this low of mana cost, you would want to... this low of an impact, you would want to enable the ability to basically be able to cap the mana so that you can get at least the less damage aspect of this. So if I change that to 4, you would have to be hitting for a very long time, but in a war of attrition, ironically, Gladiator gets a note called War of Attrition, this is more feasible in a very, very long, prolonged fight. However, 10 seconds to reach that mana cost, I don't think we're going to be doing that with this build. It would be towards like the last like 4 seconds. You would have to not life tap like a cast 1 damage taken Steel Skin. You would have to not life tap your War Banner and your Frostblink, because War Banner does have a mana cost of 19. Your Enduring Cry would have a mana cost, all that kind of stuff. So keep that in mind. What else? You can use the cast 1 damage Frost Bomb. This is really helpful with life regeneration mobs and bosses, especially early on with like Maven invites and stuff like that. I will personally be utilizing this technology. I don't think Berserk is worth it at all in this build. In case I forgot to show the Anoint, this is using Veteran's Wrath. Veteran's Wrath is 2 gold oils and 1 violet. Unfortunately, if you play SSF like I do, this means that you have to engage with the Blight mechanic. Oh no! So, yeah, I just don't think Berserk is worth it in this build. If you're doing precise technique, you can utilize Element Weakness as a curse, and then you can disable this Elemental Mastery. Volatile Haste is an option for this build as well. However, all these extra stuff, unless it's on a cast 1 damage setup, makes it so that you have to press way more buttons. Shield Charge Fortify is also another option. Due to the Fizz as extra scaling damage, your Shield Charge will hit really hard if you choose to use one, granting you some fortification while mapping, regardless if you have the body armor enchant or not. It'll just fall off very quickly. However, if you choose to use a Shield Charge setup, this can work with a build like this. You just have to make sure that your shield charge is... So let's just go to shield charge here. We go to config. Where is the config for shield charge? Where is it? There should be like a travel distance thing here somewhere. I'm not seeing it. Maybe I'm blind. There should be a travel distance thing. Maybe this automatically assumes the maximum travel. Anyways, regardless, 100k average damage, you're probably going to be fine. Well, that's also assuming that you have like all the other stuff up. But you can see here that you have a 33% crit chance. So like the odd chance that you crit, especially if the enemy is like full life while mapping, yeah, you're gonna eventually crit and it'll like pretty much cap your fortify. Like I'm 90% certain that you can cap your fortify with just shield charge in a build like this, because it takes advantage of so much Fizz as extra scaling. And then from the tree, you have a lot of like base Fizz, and then you have a shield that has a relatively decent amount of armor. So I do think that a shield charge fortify setup is serviceable in a build like this. I know this video has been super long. However, this is covering as much depth, as much detail, as much handholdy as I've ever made a build guide. Period. So I hope this helps whoever is watching. This is what I am league starting in SSF. SSF. Not trade, SSF. I can make this work in SSF. I'm 100% confident that I can make this work in SSF. I play a lot of weird, wacky builds. I've league started Cold Dot without a traditional Cold Dot tree. I've league started Bleed Gladiator last league. I've league started Champion Lightning Strike with dual wield Ichimonjis and a private league. I have league started with the... Well, not league started with the Poison Conch bouncing, but I made a Poison Conch bouncing build as a Pathfinder with 0 template to go by, and I reached level 100. I was the first Pathfinder in the SSF bracket to reach level 100. I believe some other guy respect, and now I'm not the first level 100 for whatever reason. I don't know why, but I was the first level 100 last league with a untested Pathfinder build using focus mods and Peaconk of bouncing. Had like somewhere around like 5-6 mil Uber DPS. It was pretty comfortable. I did a lot of content on that build, so I'm confident in my own capabilities and I'm confident in this build. So I just hope that you've taken this information and been able to practically apply it to your Leaguestart. Everything is going to be in these notes. This is, like I said, the most in-depth I've ever made a build guide. This is strictly because it's a Leaguestart situation. I am typically not a hand-holdy player. I don't like telling people what to do. This is just my template for what I'm going to be aiming for. I could go in a completely different direction. That is unlikely, but I could. So that's it for this video. I hope you have a wonderful Leaguestart, and if you've somehow made it to the end of this video, I'm just letting you know, I'm never gonna ask for fucking like, subscribe, shares, whatever bullshit. This is the only time I will ever ask for that, unless I do this as a fucking full-time job, which is highly unlikely. So anyways, I hope this helps anybody out there. See ya. Peace.